Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nitsa coming back with another bullseye of a tutorial here today on the channel. I wanted to talk about the legend, the mogul, Mr. Big Boss Rick Ross Rose. I wanted to talk about his sound. You know, growing up in South Florida, Rick Ross, he was always one of those rappers that I respect his hustle so much. He was always about hustle, 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 hustle. I respect him. And, you know, we've seen a lot of rappers come and go, but Rick Ross is one of the legendary rappers. You know, he's a staple rapper. So, you know, he's a mogul. He's up there with Jay-Z. He's doing stuff with them big boys. So I just wanted to do a vocal chain today that's going to be completely free. I could get it down below. Any more ideas for any more different type of artists y'all want to see, go ahead and drop it. I'm more than happy to get to it. So let's go ahead and break down Rick Ross's sound. So the very first thing I will always consider with the artist recording them is you got to understand the microphone. You know, a microphone is like a camera. You got to understand, is this camera taking an accurate picture of who the artist is as a person or what the type of vibe or the sound they're going for? So with Rick Ross, I would consider something like a Neumann U87. So there was like the 47, 67, then you had the 87. Yeah. And it's a very interesting progression because it's not only just the actual, like the shape and the way the microphone was capturing stuff. It was also the components that was a part of that progression that we got, how we got to the 87. So the 87 is a fat microphone. And the thing about it too is that people, you know, originally a lot of the gear, a lot of the stuff was using tubes. You know, a lot of the early compressors, early consoles, also in early microphones, they use tubes. And the thing about the you know, 87, what made it a little bit better is because it's more reliable. You know, sometimes tubes, they, even though they have an incredible character, they're really rich and warm, sometimes they could give some problems. You know, the studio time is all about being efficient, all about getting in there and getting the work done. So that's always something you got to prioritize too with your gear. You know, sometimes you got to get something that just works and it consistently works every single day. So that's why people would always, you know, swear by 87, because it consistently gave them that good sound. Another problem they had as well is with the you know, the tube microphone. Sometimes they had like a certain noise floor where they would really have to like record really high to beat the noise of the tubes, because, you know, sometimes tubes get noisy as well. So you know, considering Rick Ross's voice, you know, I would use something like the 87. I'm actually literally talking into the 87 right now, and oh my god, you know, you have the AI. This would be the AI because it's like the more modern version, but then you have something like here, which is the more vintage version, which, you know, it sounds great as well. I can't even lie, I could really imagine this one on Rick Ross's voice because it does have a more like swag, like type of tone. But I like this one a little bit more because it's a little bit, it sounds a little bit brighter, it sounds a little bit more clarity. And that's the thing that the U87 is known for. It has great presence and kind of like that 2K range that really helps bring out the articulation, the nuances. And that's what Rick Ross is all about. Kind of like, he has like a low mid type of deep kind of voice, a little bit type of voice, you know. And I think that this would just be incredible to capture Rick Ross, how he say he's a big boss and everything like that. And I just love this type of you know, microphone. It's a large condenser, and a large condenser too just really helps capture a lot more of that energy that's coming from the artist. So that's something that we always got to consider. You know, this microphone is so good because it works on so many different types of sources: vocals, piano. It's great for singers, rappers, all types of stuff. And, you know, it's just really the kind of like the optimal thing because it's so reliable. Everywhere you go, if they got an 87, you know what type of sound that you're going to get. And that's because of those fat components inside the microphone. You know, they're a little bit more consistent. That's the thing about making music. You don't want too many variables that's all over the place. You know, like, oh, is the tube the tube gonna want to act up today or not? You know, that's something that I feel like people neglect when they try to you know, push tube microphones on people online. You know, sometimes these tube microphones, they take time to boot up, and some days the tube just be acting up. You know, it's not something that's really consistent all of the time. Of course, new technology probably got a little bit more consistent, but something like a 87 or a fat microphone, you know, it's just gonna be better because it's always going to not take too much time to get booted up, and it's just going to give you that consistent sound every day. After that, let's look at what we would be using on Rick Ross's voice. You know, when it comes to something like a preamp, I would be going for something creamy and smooth and rich with Rick Ross. And, you know, a type of preamp that I would pick would be something like the Universal Audio 610. I really like this one a lot as well. And this knob right here is very interesting. Like I always say, you know, back in the days when it was broadcast, them boys did not have faders. So they had to like that. They had like a knob like that, and they had to grind the knob all day long. They had to grind that freaking knob knob to like ride the gain of people's voices on the news, you know, because the human voice is a very dynamic thing. You know, even when you look at this VU meter right here, you can see that some words have more energy than other words. That's just the nature of, you know, the human voice. You know, it goes up, it goes down. So, you know, people usually had to grind that level all day long. And imagine how that would make your wrist hurt if you had to keep turning it left and right, left and right. So that brought the invention of the LA2A. You know, I would definitely use something like the LA2A on Rick Ross's voice, just because it's just very smoothing. You know, it's very round, and just the way that the you know, this one specifically does not have the sound of the tube. This is the legacy version. So the only thing that it's giving you is just the actual compression. It's just doing the job pretty much. It's not giving you the input and the output, you know, distortion that you get from the tube. I think that's really good when it comes to like tracking, because, you know, you kind of just want something clean on the way in. Then when you're in the DAW and you have the beat and you hearing everything back, then you want to make your decision. Some people like to use, you know, you can use whatever, but that's just kind of my mindset. I like to use the legacy version. But the main important thing too with this, you know, this 610 preamp from Universal Audio is that it just really sounds really good on a lot of people's voices. And you know, it's something that I used for a long time. I would say the majority of my songs that I you know, recorded when I first got my Apollo was with this. And I think this is like something that Bill Putnam created as well. Very interesting. I don't know what it is, but when I do this little shelf right here, this low and high shelf, I don't know, it just does something really nice to the vocal. So I usually never EQ on the way in, but you know, I've done this move many times, and maybe you guys should copy this preamp setting with the LA2A and see what it gives you. All right, cool. So then after that, with Rick Ross's voice, you know, Rose, Lemon Pepper, Mr. Lemon Pepper, Wingstop himself, we would be going with something like you know, a pull tag. And of course, I wouldn't even use it like in a situation where I would be EQing his vocal on the way in. I'm just using it for the components, you know? So I like the sound of the tube from a Pultec more than I like the sound of the tube from LA2A for Rick Ross's voice, just because this one, the Pultec, it just sounds expensive. You know what I mean? And I have to understand that's the theme of Rick Ross's music. You know, he likes to talk about the expensive luxury barrel voices, made bags. You feel me? So you got to understand that too as an engineer, you know, like what image are we going for here? Like what type of style are we going here for? Like, are we going for like the trenches type of sound? Or are we going for like mogul, multi-millionaire? And then based on the image that we're going for, we got to paint the portrait of the artist in that way. So I will use something like the EQ-P1A, which, you know, that the sound of this tube specifically here, it has a very type of bright, and full in the low end. I would say the tube that's inside the LA2A, it's more of like a warming characteristic where it has like a smoothing on the top. That's why I use the legacy version, but for the Pultec, that would be my tube. So it's kind of like I'm adjusting the output tube of the LA2A, if you kind of think about it, you know. So yeah, and let's look at you know, anything else that we have for Rick Ross as well. I see Rick Ross was always, you know, he's a guy who's big on connections. That's why he's so successful, because he's such a big boss, but he knows how to play the game. You know, it's not all about just making music, it's all about your connections, and you got to have genuine connections with people, because when you're in the industry, I feel like everybody is good at making music. So the only difference between, you know, this person or this person is going to come down to the personality, their character. That's what I always felt like, you know, like you can't really say that who's better, Drake or Future. Like you can't really say who's better, you know, Jay-Z or Rick Ross. Like, you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, once you hit that threshold of like, okay, they're both legendary rappers, like they're both legendary, they're both Hall of Fame, then it really comes down to your preference. It really comes down to your life perspective. You know, who can you relate a little bit more to in their music? So that's what I always feel like is like kind of like the deciding factor when it comes to making music. And I always want y'all to keep that in y'all head. So very interesting as well. They had some Pro Tools interfaces as well. I think those are Avid HDIOs, and you know, those HDIOs are so important. That's why Pro Tools is considered the quote unquote industry standard, because for the longest time when they were still using them consoles, but they still wanted the benefits of the computer, well, guess what? The Pro Tools was the only one that compete. That's why Pro Tools is quote unquote the industry standard. And even to this day, people say that, oh, there's no other DAW that you could just spread out a whole like analog console tracks on and still have, you know, like the smooth, seamless workflow that Pro Tools gives. So that's what the thing about Pro Tools was, you know, that's why people love Pro Tools. That's why it's the industry standard, just because of that reason itself. You know, it had a reputation for being reliable. That's the most important thing about, you know, building a home studio. You need stuff that's reliable so that every single day you rapping, you putting in work, it's not a bunch of things that are up and down. It's not a roller coaster. It's just you continuously improving. You feel me? You have a consistency that you building up. All right, then the last thing with Rick Ross is like the reverb I would use on Rick Ross's voice. And the reverb that I would use is just something like a this is the compressor I'm talking into right now. But the thing that I would use on Rick Ross's voice, it would have to be the pure plate. I just love how the pure plate sounds over specifically the AMS, just because I know the pure plate here, it kind of does something in the highs. It kind of has like this nice little shimmer in the highs. So I would pick this one over something like the AMS, which is what I usually pick for the rap reverb. But I'd pick this one, the pure plate UAD, incredible plugin that comes with a lot of their interfaces as well. And this one just sounds so good. And I would put just like a little EQ over it. So Ross got a little bit of that, you know, type of vibe going on. That's why I like UAD so much. You know, I just got the spare microphone and I absolutely love this thing. But the thing about UAD that makes it so good is the fact that you can hear yourself in the headphones. You can hear the reverb. It really just gets the artist in the mood. That's what stuff is all about. You got to buy stuff that's going to get you in the mood to record, because some days you ain't going to want to rap. You know, life happens. Some days days are good, some days are bad, but you got to keep consistently working if you want to get good at making music. It's kind of like, you know, trying to be a bodybuilder. You know, even some days when you want to quit, you still got to go to the gym and put in that workout, because that's how you're going to get to your end goal. So I just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube family. I really do appreciate y'all. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Any more change y'all want to see, go ahead and drop it down below. I'm more than happy to get to it. And don't forget to check out this free Rick Ross template. Rose, peace.